I've interviewed, gosh, 3,000 or 4,000 CEOs at this point, and I could tell very quickly if somebody was a good CEO or maybe a more average CEO. And the bad CEOs, I'd call them and I go, how many hours a week are you working? And they go, 75, 80 hours a week. Where do you spend your time? Well, a little here, a little there, managing the board. But they weren't clear on how they selected where they spent their time, and they clearly were spending a lot of hours. And the third question was, well, how are the results? And they go, well, not as good as I'd like them to be. Then you talk to somebody else and they go, how many hours a week are you working? I don't know, like 50, 55. The CEO is not a 40-hour-a-week job. Like, let's be clear about that. Where do you spend that time? Well, this quarter I've been really focused on my sales processes because they were weak and we weren't getting the results we want. I think I've got that worked out with a change in process and a change in talent. And now I've created an operational problem, so I'm going to go work on supply chain for another quarter, so try to get that worked out. So, and then you go, how much of your time do you spend at that most important item? We'll say 30, 40% of my time. So everything else that CEOs do, they shrank down into what's left, but they prioritize time at the point of constraint.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Flow Over Fear. I am really glad you're here today. I have a great guest. Jim Schleckser is the founder and CEO of the CEO Project, where he and his team work with over 100 CEOs of high-growth companies to help them identify and obliterate the things that stand between them and continued organizational success. He's also the author of the best-selling book, the viral best-selling book, which we're going to get into a little bit, Great CEOs Are Lazy. Oh, and I love that title. And the author of Professional Drinking, A Spirited Guide to Wine, Cocktails, and Confident Business Entertaining. And when he's not writing books and leading CEOs, he's a columnist for Inc.com. Jim has over 30 years of experience leading global organizations, including a technology company valued at over $1 billion. And his wisdom has been shared in the New York Times, Time Magazine, and the Huffington Post, among others. Welcome, Jim. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Adam. Looking forward to it.
It's an impressive resume, and I'm really excited to dig in here because I really love this concept of lazy CEOs. Being a CEO myself, I want to figure out how that works. But I want to kind of get into your story a bit and find out your origin, where you came from. So can you maybe give us a little background on where you're from, how you grew up, and how you got into the CEO world?
Yep. So my father was a chemical engineer. We moved around a lot. So I've lived in Jersey and New York and California and all over the place. But that caused me to go into chemical engineering. And I was funny. I look back at when did you decide or think you might want to run a business? And I read when I was like 13 or 14 years old. I read Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, and I read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And I said, man, that sounds pretty cool to me to run businesses. And that became my objective. Now, the chemical engineering thing was really because my father was, but I really knew I was not a very good chemical engineer. Very quickly got an MBA, went into sales and marketing, and at 29 started running companies. Technology companies. And basically my whole life I've run companies. I love it. I like to think I'm decent at it. And now I help other CEOs become better at what they do through the CEO Project with the CEO advisory work. So yeah, that's sort of how it went.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, you started in the chemical engineering field and then kind of moved into business. We have kind of almost a reverse kind of thing there because I didn't start out in the chemical world with a degree. I was in psychology, and then I ended up in the chemical world as the CEO of a chemical company. But yeah, it's interesting how those things work out, how we find what we want to do. So I
used to joke.
Go ahead.
I should have gotten a degree in early childhood education because half the time you're like, okay, you two need to play nice together. That's half the job sometimes. I'm like, I got the wrong degree.
That's so true. And I actually love to expand on that a little bit because I found that, I think maybe the perception of those outside of the world of the CEO or the leader of a company or organization in general is that, it's making all of these decisions on behalf of the business. But you're right, like 75, 80% of the time, it's kind of just managing drama. Was that your experience?
Yeah. If you remember, David Letterman had a bit they called stupid pet tricks. People bring their pet on and they do some trick. Yeah. We used to call them stupid people tricks. Like, what were you thinking that was a good idea? And the drama that ensued, yeah, there was a lot of, go to your corners. Let's talk about it. Let's come up with an answer that works. There was a fair amount of that. Although I have to say, I wouldn't intervene as often as people wanted me to. And I did that very consciously because I said, they're always coming to daddy, if you will. Yeah. They're not learning how to solve their own problems. So sometimes I would listen. I go, look, you two can solve this problem and you're going to leave and go solve it. And if you come back to me, I'll solve it for you, but you're probably not going to like how I solve it. So, and that worked more often than not. So yeah, there's a fair amount of the drama and he's looking at me funny stuff that shows up. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that approach. And did you find that over time when you were using that, kind of pushing it back on the people to solve their own problems, did you find that they were coming to you less, or how did that work out?
Yeah, I think over time it built organizational capacity. And sometimes I even start the conversation. If it was more of a technical problem, I go, have you guys tried everything you know how to try to solve this before you ask me? And they go, yeah, we tried everything. I'm like, okay, then I'm in. I'm 100% in once you've given it the go and you can't get it resolved. I'm happy to help. But it decreased over time because they knew I was going to ask that question first. And a lot of times when they really gave it the effort, they go, oh, look at that. We've got an answer. And I didn't have to get involved.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and so what prompted you to kind of leave the world of leading organizations and start leading leaders? How did that transition work out for you?
Oh, that's easy. I was fired.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was running the last company. It was a telecom company. There was a change at the top and I lasted about 60 days or something. And then I was out, which is fine. That's an occupational hazard at that level. And, Adam, I got to say, it was the greatest blessing I've ever had in my life. I didn't like the travel I was doing. I was away from my boys. I was feeling guilty when I'd hop on the plane or fly to China or whatever I was doing. And I'm like, man, why am I doing this? I'm under stress. I don't like some of the things. I don't like the being away. And I didn't find it very fulfilling. And so when I got fired, I'm like, this is a sign to change into something different. And I always knew it was either run a big company, like a multinational company, and I was kind of heading there, or run my own thing. I said, it's time. It's time for me to run my own thing. And I had lots of offers to go run people's companies. And I go, well, how is this going to be different? What's going to be different about today? And the answer was nothing. They go, oh, you make a lot of money. I make a lot of money. Oh, you'll get to run your show. I run the show. There was nothing that made me want to do it. And so I benefited from CEO peer groups while I was running various companies. I found them really useful to help, check my thinking or expand my thinking or just ground me. And I said, I love the business model. I love the intellectual stimulation. I love the impact. And so I ended up getting into that business as a result of it.
Yeah. Can you expand more on the idea of the peer groups for CEOs and executives in general? Because I think that's a concept that's really important, the idea of community.
Yeah. So if you go back to Napoleon Hill, which is, 30s or something like that, he talked about the idea of a mastermind group and building a group of people around you that have no agenda, but are there to help you, are smart and want to help you with your journey. And as CEOs, we really don't have that. I mean, you'd say, well, I've got a board. A board is not a no consequence environment, right? You kind of have to listen to them. They sometimes have an agenda, particularly when you have like private equity on your board. They are loyal to the money and the company, as opposed to you who's loyal to the company and the money. And that you go, well, that's the same. I go, no, it's the same most of the time, but some of the time it is very, very different. And now you've got somebody who's got opposed interests on your board. So that's painful. Or sometimes they've got other agendas you have to deal with. So who do you go to? Your spouse? Can you go to your executive team? Well, some issues I can't go to my executive team yet. It's not baked enough. It's not ready enough. So a CEO peer group, an advisory board effectively, and some people think about advisory boards here, but I'm going to say that as an option, they tend to be expensive. It's a lot of money because you have to pay these people, travel, so forth, and logistics and organizational time. So it's just a lot of effort as opposed to a CEO peer group. Economics are better. You show up, you do the work, you go home. Done. Somebody else curates the group, runs the thing, makes sure the logistics are taken care of. So when we compare it to an advisory board, and that's really the nearest competitive thing you could name, the economics, the time, logistics are just on a whole nother level. And the caliber of people you get around you are people you probably couldn't recruit onto an advisory board. They're just like, I'm not going to take 20, 30 grand a year. It's just not worth it to me. But if the deal is you help me and I help you, I'm all in on that idea.
Yeah, well, that's powerful. I mean, I found that experience to be true for me coming into the CEO role when I did, just kind of trying to figure it out all on my own. It feels lonely at the top. It feels lonely at that level. I mean, you just don't have a lot of like trustworthy things, but finding that mastermind for me was the most powerful thing that I could have done. And I think one of the benefits that I saw, and I don't know if you found this as well, is that when we're getting the value from other people, we're also hearing the struggles that other CEOs are going through, what we can expect, and providing that value as well. Did you see that was kind of an important element there as well?
Yeah, we do a process called decision blueprints. These are like case studies from MBA school, and it's at the point of constraint. You probably read Eli Goldratt's The Goal. In any system you can name, there's a point of constraint. We call it the kink in the hose in the book, in the Great CEOs Are Lazy book. And your job when you're trying to get water through a hose is find the kink, open it up. Then same thing's true in a business. Somewhere there's a kink, might be marketing, might be sales, might be production, might be recruiting. And the job of the CEO is to go figure out where that kink in the hose is and open it up through a couple of mechanisms that are high leverage. And people bring that to the group and they get great feedback, immediately impact on their business. But there's usually 7 or 8 other people in the group. They can model and learn from the other CEOs because they're like size, like complexity. And I go, oh, I love what Adam's doing on sales compensation. Man, that is really, I'm just going to steal it, right? Why should I come up with something new when he's already figured it out? The other benefit is because they are together for an extended period of time. A quarter or 2 quarters later, I might say, hey, Adam, how's that sales compensation thing working out? I mean, you made a big change. Is that going the way you think it should be going, or where's that at? And that's really powerful and helpful. The funniest one we had is sometimes the advice you give is the advice you should listen to. We had one guy, one of the most scattered CEOs ever. He's in 10 different things and traveling the world. And he's talking to one of the other CEOs of the group and says, listen, you just need to focus and pick one thing and really do great at it. And everybody in the group turns their head and look at him like, Bob, what do you know what you're saying right now? So, yeah, sometimes you need to take your own advice. Actually, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, taking your own medicine. I mean, it's not always easy, but yeah, it's easy to see it on somebody else than it is to see it on ourselves a lot of times.
That's the moral of the story right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to dig into this lazy CEO concept because it is intriguing to me. But first of all, so the book, Great CEOs Are Lazy, and your podcast as well, the Lazy CEO podcast.
Yes.
So your book had a viral element to it. So it went viral for a time where I think it was you'd mentioned it was one of the top books sold on all of Amazon, not just a category, but all of Amazon. How did that happen?
Man, if I could have engineered it, I would have. But the book's been in market since 2016. It's not a new book or anything, but it continues to sell. The title's intriguing, and I think people refer it to other people once they find it. But it was maybe late July, early August. Sales just started running crazy. We sell primarily through Amazon, order after order after. I'm like, what is going on? And some friends started sending me videos. They said, hey, this guy mentioned your book in the video. And it's one of these guys that sticks a microphone in somebody's face and like, what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to build a business? And this gentleman, he's called the Sweatpants Millionaire, said, well, you got to learn how to delegate. And I learned about this 70% rule of delegating. If somebody's 70% ready, you give them the job. And I learned it in this book, Great CEOs Are Lazy. And he flashed up the book. A couple of seconds. That caused thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of book sales to happen. Wow. I wish I could have predicted it, but yeah, a 7-year-old book went viral and just sold the wheels off it. That book was number 13 in all of Amazon. Amazon has 3 or 4 million books they sell, and that was number 13 in all of them. It's crazy. The funniest thing, Adam, was, so I had hundreds of reviews, not thousands, hundreds of reviews. Every book that I was near, 22,000 reviews, 35,000 reviews. I mean, they were legendary books. And I'm like,
Right.
Yeah, what am I doing in this crowd? I have no idea. It was pretty funny.
I hope you got a screenshot of that rating there.
Oh, heck yeah.
Frame it on your wall.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
I love it. So, so let's talk about the concept of laziness. So what is the value of laziness? Can you give us some context on what that means for somebody in a top role?
Yeah, so this came out. I mean, I've interviewed, 3,000 or 4,000 CEOs at this point, and I could tell very quickly if somebody was a good CEO or maybe a more average CEO. And the bad CEOs, I'd call them and I go, how many hours a week are you working? And they go, 75, 80 hours a week. Great. Where do you spend your time? And they go, well, little here, little there, managing the board, but they weren't clear on how they selected where they spent their time. And they clearly were spending a lot of hours. And the third question was, well, how are the results? And they go, well, not as good as I'd like them to be. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you talk to somebody else and they go, how many hours a week are you working? I don't know, like 50, 55. CEO is not a 40-hour-a-week job. Like, let's be clear about that.
Sure.
Go, where do you spend that time? Well, this quarter I've been really focused on my sales processes because they were weak and then we weren't getting the results we want. I think I've got that worked out with a change in process and a change in talent. And now I've created an operational problem. So I'm going to go work on supply chain for another quarter. So try to get that worked out. So, and then you go, how much of your time do you spend at that most important item? We'll say 30, 40% of my time. So everything else that CEOs do, they shrank down into what's left, but they prioritize time at the point of constraint. Now, they didn't say it the way the book says it. I kind of pulled that out of the conversations. But I said there's a theoretical base, which is this Eli Goldratt theory of constraints. They were doing it. They didn't even know they were doing it. But that was the difference between the good ones and the very average ones. I said, well, isn't that interesting? You can work less hours. Your dog doesn't hate you. Your family knows you. And you get better results. I'm like, man, that sounds like something people should know about. And that's the genesis of the book.
I like that. Yeah. I mean, and I like the concept of it. It reminds me of a quote, a somewhat famous quote by Jeff Bezos, which love him or hate him, this was interesting to me that, he said that, that basically a CEO's role is to make a very small number of high quality decisions. That's really the whole role of a leader. Does that resonate kind of with what you're talking about there?
Yeah, maybe another quote, and then I'll dive into that. Bill Gates has a quote. It's in the book. If I want an important job to be done, I find a lazy person to do it because I'll find an efficient way to get the job done. So it's that spirit that we come to this with. Not that we're not going to get the job done or not do important things. We're just going to do that very efficiently. Well, with regard to Bezos, one of my clients actually talked about that, a guy named Jim Parham, who now works with us, by the way. So he had his liquidity event, and he's one of our advisors now. All of our advisors are former CEOs. And he said, Jim, I probably make 4 decisions a year that really, really matter. The problem is I'm not certain which ones those are when I'm making them. I kind of find out later. Some are obvious, but there's some you're like, oh my gosh, that was actually a really, really important decision that I made 6 months ago. Thank God I think I made it the right way. So I think Bezos is right, but I'm not completely certain how you figure out of the 50 or 100 you might make a year, which are the 4 that are going to be the inflection points. That may be harder than he didn't really talk about that. So I think that's the hard bit.
That is the hard part. I've been struggling with that myself because you do get a lot of, it does come up where those small drama issues or trying to solve problems for other people come up, but they're important enough or they're urgent enough. We can't just fit them in the box of, are they important for now? Are they important for later? Are they long-term important?
Yep.
It gets challenging. And so from your experience leading organizations, you'd mentioned that, once you made the transition out of corporate leadership and into helping CEOs, that, you were tired of the travel, tired of working so much. Do you feel like did you ever get to that point of being the lazy CEO that you wanted to be, or were you struggling with that? You didn't learn about that till later.
I was largely unsuccessful in the corporate world at accomplishing this. And I'm going to say it's a little bit harder in the corporate world. It's probably easier as an entrepreneur. But because there are a lot of demands on your time and the optics around how you spend your time, I think are a little more difficult. I would say I've been profoundly successful in this business to be a lazy CEO. I only work on what matters. I don't work on stuff that isn't going to lever and improve the capability of the business or improve the size of the business or improve the quality of what we offer. And I don't work 80 hours a week by any stretch of the imagination. So I'd say I did better in this version of me than my prior versions of me.
Yeah. Well, and you made an interesting point there, and I'd love to hear you expand on it, that it may be easier for entrepreneurs than it is for CEOs of maybe an organization that they don't own outright. Can you kind of expand on that a bit on why that is?
Yeah. Because I'd say if you're trying to go left and everybody else is trying to go right, it can be very difficult when the tide is flowing in that direction. And so if you're trying to run your career, run your job a certain way of, I spend 40% of my time on the most important issue. I shrink everything else into this minimum available time, and then I go home. Mm-hmm. There are people that believe that, more hours matter. Being physically present matters. We're getting this with this whole back to office thing. Do you have to be here or not? But also they go, well, why are you not going to the operations meeting? Why are you not going to the marketing meeting? Why are you not going to the HR, happy, joy meeting? Why are you not, because they don't need me. They can make all the decisions. The lazy CEO would go, is there any decision that will occur in that meeting that I need to be involved in? And they go, no, it's more of an update. Send me an email. I don't need to be at the meeting. But there is symbolism in corporate structure when the leader shows up at something. It means your meeting's important because the boss showed up, right? And that's what I mean by optics. There are these sort of ritualistic, optically important, politically important behaviors that we have to exhibit to be, the right kind of person in that particular culture. But if you're running your own thing, you go, you know what? I'm not doing it. And then what are you going to, I just choose not to do it. And I'll explain why. And I'm not dissing you. I don't mean to do that. But when I do that, I say, look, I have complete trust in you to make all of these decisions. I will support you 100%. You do not need to consult with me. You own it. I don't. If you really need me after the meeting, come and check with me and I'll help you on some hard issue. But other than that, you've got this. I don't need to be there. So I'm empowering somebody as opposed to they feel like I have to be there to watch over so they have authority to do what they need, which occurs in corporate environments. So I think it's about trusting your people. And I think once they learn that you really, in fact, do trust them to make these decisions, they go, okay, it's my meeting now. I don't know. Jim doesn't need to be there, which makes me super happy. Back to, remember, the goal of the CEO is to build organizational capacity. And so if I make my people better, more confident, more able to handle decisions, I just permanently improve the capability of the organization with that move. So while I look lazy, what I really did was make the company better, make the people better. And so they kind of go together.
So when you say organizational capacity, can you explain what that means? How we do that, what that looks like in a perfect organization?
I'll go this way. We talk about 5 hats in the book, which is where CEOs should spend their time. One of them is coach, and a coach hat is high leverage. And they're all either high leverage, and they're high leverage in this sense because I invest time and I create an asset that pays me back over time. It's not I do it once and then it evaporates and it's gone, right? Like a project, and the project goes away and then we're done. If I spend time with somebody, coaching them, advising them, expanding their role, they just got better. They're 5% better, 10% better over time, 20, 30% better. Well, now the organization can handle more work, can handle more people. They can lead more people. We can now expand because that person's more effective than they were before I did that work with them. And so I have, in fact, increased organizational capacity to do stuff, whatever the stuff is. Well, now I've got, imagine that. I've got 7 people working for me. I've increased all of them by 10%. I went back to my office and put my feet up. They're all 10% better than they were, right? Yeah. That's the perfect, and hopefully they're doing that with their people and so forth. And we've actually seen it, Adam, where organizations are grow. They're doing great. And all of a sudden they go, okay, we need somebody to open up Topeka for us. And they go, nobody's ready. We don't have anybody. We haven't invested in the people. We haven't grown the people. We don't have the capacity to take on this cool opportunity that was presented to us because we haven't done the work here. And so that's really the point. And literally, and sometimes that's systems and sometimes that's people. Like I haven't invested in my IT systems or my culture or so forth. They have to actually pause the growth, while they rebuild capacity in either talent or systems, for example, to then enable themselves to grow again. So it's a real deal. I've seen it with a number of the people we work with, and they didn't invest in these things or didn't think about them. And then they got a flat tire that they had to go fix before they could continue their journey.
Hey everyone, I interrupt this program to introduce you to a powerful tool that will help you gain clarity on your vision and accelerate your growth and achievement. If you're listening to this show, it is likely that you have an exciting vision for your life. But the problem is that we often get caught up in the day-to-day. We get distracted, we face uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And as a result, the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems insurmountable. And that's why I created a framework for how you can turn your vision into strategic, disciplined action that will accelerate your results in the next 90 days. I call it the Vision Reflection Retreat. It is a 2-day solo excursion designed to reignite passion and adventure into your busy life and realign your focus toward your why. This is the very same framework that I use every 90 days to reflect on my own life and my vision and set my goals for the next quarter. And it has been a game changer. And the good news is that I'm giving away this Vision Reflection Retreat guidebook for free when you sign up for my newsletter. Simply go to flowoverfear.com/retreat and download your free guide and enjoy the journey. Gosh, I'm so glad you said that about investing in the people, because it's one of those things where you can look at how to personally develop for yourself as a leader of an organization and how to make yourself build yourself up. But if you're not doing that with the people and helping them to be the same kinds of leaders in their positions or giving them the opportunities, it doesn't go anywhere. No. And so I love that. I love that you pointed that out. Could you give maybe a little more context into how, or would you suggest maybe even that the leaders in your organization, like executives and things like that, have their own masterminds that they go to and or try to get that kind of outside perspective as well?
Yeah. And let's just go to development for a second and then hit that.
Sure.
You think about what you spend maintaining your plant and equipment in a business. Mm-hmm. It's a couple of % of the value of the plant and equipment. So the question goes, well, what percentage of your payroll do you spend on development? And the answer is probably a lot less as a percentage. So is your equipment more important than your people? Is that really what you're trying to communicate? And I'm going to tell you that even spend a couple of % of payroll on development is really hard to do. Like, you have to work to do it. Sure. And then I got it done in a couple of companies I ran. And what I did is, when we were having a development, I would force you are going to something to expand your capability. Let's figure out what that is that's most useful and interesting to you. So I would, if they weren't naturally inclined to constantly improve themselves, which some people are not, I would kind of force the issue. Like, I need you to get better. I want you to get better. I'm willing to spend money to get you better. So let's figure out what that looks like. With regard to mastermind groups, which I think are awesome, I'm obviously a huge fan. The sort of CXO, director, VP level masterminds the market is less populated for people in that role. And that's probably a need in the market that needs to be created. So I'm going to argue you can find some of those, your tribe, if you will, in discipline oriented organizations like a COO organization or the organization for your industry. Or maybe it's just a bunch of really switched on friends that you can find that, we'll hang out, we'll just talk about issues once in a while. Not football today. Right. What's going on in our lives? Let's do an hour on that. But I will say that, particularly for men, male adult friendship of that type is really hard. We just stink at it, man. Women they got us on this by 100%. So we're bad. We're really bad at it.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, it's definitely something we have to force ourselves into. I feel that same way. I mean, for 33 years of my life, I tried to do everything on my own, and the world just opened up after I started joining communities. I mean, it was just amazing how that works. So I can't express how important that is. Is there kind of a metric or specific like percentage of payroll you're thinking like would be ideal for investing in people?
Yeah, I can do it on, I could do it on revenue and then translate it to payroll. So
Sure.
if you're over 1% of revenue being spent on people development, you're probably at least national class or in the top quartile. If you go as high as 1.5% of revenue, you are probably one of the better ones around nationally at that point. So if you say payroll is about a third of revenue, around numbers, just multiply those numbers by 3%. 3% of revenue, you're doing great. 4.5% of revenue, you're killing it. But think about think about a $10 million company with $3 million of payroll. It means you're spending $100,000 on development a year. That doesn't sound so big. Go try to do it. It's not that easy to spend it and spend it well. You could throw it away, but to spend it well, not easy. Not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you right now, even it just kind of widens my eyes to think of honestly spending $100,000 even in an organization our size. It's those kinds of things. And you have to clear them with the board. Those kinds of things are tough, but man, they're worthwhile if you could put them into effect.
Well, if you want to keep growing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the best thing that you can invest in. I mean, is the people development. I mean, if that's where the ideas are coming from, that's where you can leverage. That's where you can build that organizational capacity as you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, I want to switch gears a bit and talk about your other love and your other passions. I know you're a sommelier, which I had to learn to say before this. So that's
just call me a wine guy. Wine guy.
A wine guy. Yeah. I won't call you a whiner. I will call you a wine guy. That's the right way. So talk a little bit about your book and your approach and why that idea of wine is important for entertaining. Because I want to dig a little bit more because I'm no longer a drinker just because I'm not allowed anymore. Okay. I can't do it. I'm just, but I'd love to hear kind of some more perspective on how that works in entertaining for business.
Yep. So I love to learn. So I'm this development conversation. I'm all in on that. I've always loved to learn. And, I enjoy drinking wine with friends and they knew so much about wine. I'm like, man, I need to go learn more about this. I really would like to learn more and kind of hang with my friends. And I read books and it just never stuck. So I said, well, I know you're an Ironman. When I was running marathons, I'm like, I can't just train. I need to train for a race, right? I need a goal. And I need a time that I'm going for on that race. And I train against that, right? So the same thing happened here. I said, well, what is a way I can check my knowledge to see if I got where I tried to get to? There's a couple of curriculum available, but I went down the Guild of Master Sommeliers. There are 4 levels: introductory, certified, advanced, master. You may have seen the movie Somm. They thought those guys are master sommeliers. They are crazy, crazy smart. So I went through this. It took me about 2 years to become a certified sommelier, level 2 sommelier. To go to the next level, I'd have to work in a restaurant, and I did that in college. I think I'm not going to go back into the restaurant at this point. Right. And once I completed, I'm like, awesome. Now what do I do? I go, So, well, I know a lot about business entertaining because I've done it for decades like you. And I know a lot about wine now. And what really struck me is when I would when I go to dinner with my clients and somebody would grab the wine menu, and these are masters of the universe, right? Powerful individuals, their hands start shaking, the flop sweat starts. They just don't know what to do when handed a wine menu. I said, boy, there's a place that I could help people, not at an incredibly high level, at a very practical level. Here's how you handle that situation. And that's basically what the book is about. How do you entertain around wine and spirits in a way that you don't look like a doofus, that you're reasonably elegant. You don't have to be a genius, but enough to get by most circumstances. And that's what the book is about, was trying to solve like that problem that I saw all the time with my clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that idea because I go in the opposite direction. We both wrote a book, somewhat about drinking, and they both went in entirely different directions. By the way, I never became a good professional drinker. I was the exact opposite. But yeah. So the idea of, I guess the ideas are that you can either go and you can become a wine expert, or you can just get sober completely altogether and just like make everyone else feel bad about drinking.
Well,
those are the ways to go.
I've gone to dinner with Mormons, right? So they're abstain, and first there's that weird like, oh my God, are they going to think about me differently? Is this going to be awkward? And most people go, look, this is my choice. You do your choice. That's okay. And and they're okay.
Yeah.
I do say, though, that there's a rule of thumb that you really shouldn't drink more than your guest. So if your guest has 0, you really should only drink 1 drink, in my book.
Yeah.
If your partner has 2, you could go to 3, but then we've also got the rule of don't get drunk at a business meeting, right? So there are boundaries on this thing.
Yeah, well, those are 2 very important rules, and I've never heard that, so I appreciate the idea of don't ever go 1 over what that's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And so I like that, and yeah, you talked about running the marathons. You are something of an adventurer too, which I really enjoy and want to kind of explore a little bit more, because I feel like one of my pillars is that adventure is the antidote to fear or anxiety. And that and that it can help us to really expand our comfort zones and maybe even become greater leaders. So you're a soccer player. You've climbed Kilimanjaro. I'd love to talk about some of these things that you've done and what drives you to do that.
Well, soccer is about, it's the one exercise I found that doesn't feel like exercise to me. So I will do it anytime, any place, anywhere. And it keeps me fit. And, and I actually own a CrossFit gym, and I don't go to it. I used to for a while, but I'm like, I didn't like it. I didn't love it as much as I love soccer. So it's so easy for me to go play soccer. I will drive to it. I'll wake up at 6 a.m. I will do whatever I have to do to play. So I can stay fit. I love it. I think when you work with your brain, I think you need a recreation that is all consuming. When I'm on the field, I am not thinking about anything else but being there. You can't. And when you are, you play incredibly poorly. So you did that. So I like it because it's an all-consuming thing for me. I cannot think about anything else. And so it's an escape, and then it's a refresh of my brain, and it's obviously physical. So I love that. The wilderness I've always been into. I grew up as a scout. My father was a scout. My boys were scouts. And so I've spent hundreds and hundreds of nights outdoors, canoeing through the Boundary Waters and up into the Quetico and in Canada, hiking the Sangre de Cristo mountain range. But the biggest singular adventure was climbing Kilimanjaro, which for some silly reason was on my bucket list. And so I said, that's it. I'm going. I organized the tour. A bunch of friends decided to come with me. So we had a great group climbing Kilimanjaro. But the rule, back to fears, is I'm actually a little afraid of heights. I don't like heights.
Yeah.
You go, so
I'm with you.
What are you doing climbing a 19,000 foot mountain? And I go, my saying is, I will not be ruled by my fears. I will not be ruled by my fears. And so any opportunity to challenge my fears, I will do it. I hate it. I mean, I remember,
sure.
So in Chicago, I guess it's now the Willis Tower, used to be the Sears Tower. If you've ever been there, at the very top, there's an observation deck, but they have these glass boxes where you can walk out and there is whatever number of feet, 1,100 feet, you to the pavement right underneath you. And all there is underneath you is glass, right? For a person who doesn't like heights, right. Like, I don't want to get anywhere near it. I'm like, nope.
Right.
I am going out there. And, I ended up not having to crawl back. Thankfully, it wasn't embarrassing with the 12-year-old kids around me, but that's why I love outdoors and I won't be ruled by my fears.
Yeah. So I haven't been to the top of the Sears Tower, and I have the same fear of heights. It's just, it terrifies me. It's one of those things. I don't know if your knees get weak as you approach the window and you're just like, but I didn't have the experience at the Sears Tower, but I did visit the Trump Tower at one of the top floors and had to look out over there. And I mean, it's just like, man, yeah, that's I don't know how people can live in those areas, but I guess it's true though. I mean, pushing past that fear, I really like that attitude because it's almost like you're embracing fear to go take it to that next level. Right.
It's not like I'm gonna, by the way, up to including, I mean, I've never done it yet, but I would skydive.
Oh, yeah.
And I know I will be a massive jello before I go out the door. I know it, but right. I won't be ruled by my fears. Right. That's you keep saying that because I see people get debilitated by their fears. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm afraid of public speaking. I'm like, you can't, you get debilitated in your life. And I just don't want that to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things I mean, in my many conversations with people like yourself and with other people who've achieved a lot of incredible things and are faced with a lot of like big decision making stuff. I mean, there's no doubt that people like in your role or people leading companies are faced with a lot of like, decisions that could affect a lot of lives. And so with that comes a lot of inherent fear that's going to happen. And you can either choose to bow to it or run from it or fight it, or you can choose to embrace it and kind of lean into it and find that other side. So I love that aspect, that approach that you're taking, where it's just like, I'm not going to be ruled by fear. I'm going to take it and move it.
Right.
How have you seen that your relationship with fear has changed in that process? Have you gotten more courageous? Do you feel it still, or do you just go anyway? How does it look?
Maybe it's an affirmation. I go, I have no fear.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean I don't. It just means I won't observably have fear, right? So
sure,
you could be left a quivering mat. Like example, our mission of the CEO project is to positively impact 1 million lives.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that through working with CEOs, and they make good decisions and they impact the people they work with, right? Well, if you step back and you go, what if I make a mistake? What if I give them the wrong advice? What if they do the wrong thing and 1,000 people lose their jobs? And like, you could be really like crushed if you really think hard about it. And
right.
I don't. I go like, look, we're going to make the right decision, and if we screw up, we'll fix it. Simple.
Yeah.
And so if you're willing to have that kind of view, there is no fear, because I'm like, we'll just fix it. No big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and so talking about the CEO project, I know you mentioned that, and that's the big thing that you're running now. I think we met through Stephen Pivnik, who's also a part of that. So talk about that. What you want to positively impact 1 million lives through. You've helped 100 CEOs. You've worked with them. What kind of work are you doing there? How does it work? And what's your target CEO for that?
Yeah, so we work with a slightly larger CEO profile, sort of 25 million revenue up to our largest are a couple of $1 billion. And we matched them, as I said, against a former CEO. So Stephen, who works with us, is a former CEO. We had a successful liquidity event, and we were with him through that process. And now he does what I do. He advises CEOs using the model that I developed. And, when people come into a CEO peer group who've never had it before, I think it's sort of like what you talked about. It's this, oh my gosh, where have these people been my whole life? I didn't know I needed this till I got into this situation. And so they become very, very close friends, trusted advisors, not just us, but the people around the table. And for us, a big part of the product is the caliber of people we're able to recruit in. If we bring a stinker into a group, it's not good for the group dynamics. And so we're pretty careful about who we're willing to work with. And we have some dynamics of what we're looking for. And the business continues to grow. It's not like this rocket ship growth. It's a very personal relationship growth business. And so it takes time for it to grow. But I can tell you that it was last year, we had our CEO summit where we bring everybody together. And we had taken over this huge bar area, and it was all our CEOs talking to each other, lots of energy. And I walked into that room, and I'm like, I couldn't believe they had all decided to affiliate with us and be part of this community that we built. It was really humbling, honestly. It was very humbling. But I think they would tell you that it's the most important thing they do. Almost all of them will. And it's represented by the longevity. They tend to stay with us very, very long periods of time. Usually when they sell their company or they exit, then they exit. But outside of that, this is part of what they do. This is how they become a better CEO. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the frameworks or the blueprint that you do use to help with CEOs?
Sure. So the meetings are quarterly. The first thing we do is a scorecard. So we do have an accountability document where you talk about how you've done in the last quarter. And more importantly, the last decision that you brought to the group. What did you do with it and how did it turn out? Because I think that longitudinal learning that I talked about is really important. When I got my MBA, we do a case on contact lenses for chickens, or who knows what it was about. And at the end of the case, everybody had the same question to the professor. They go, okay, what did they really do? because you're presented with a situation. You have to come up with, well, what would I do? Why would I do it? What? And we go, okay, great. What did they actually do? We really wanted to know because there was learning in that. And I think when you stay with people for a while, you get to find out, well, what really happened as a result of that decision. And that's value. So the accountability document is important. And I'm going to tell you, Adam, that we've had people that have come for a while, time after time, and they were not making progress. And the members of the group go, look, I'm tired of telling Jim what to do when he's never going to follow any of the advice we give him. He's not a learner, right? And they get voted off the island, unfortunately. But that's the right answer, and so be it. We hate to have that happen. I view it as we made a selection error. We brought somebody into a group that we shouldn't have brought in, and it's our fault, but it happens. But then the other, and this is the important part, is from an epistemological point of view, our learning methodology is case study. So some people use external speakers, but my read on that is, well, sometimes that speaker deals with an issue I'm dealing with. Maybe once in a great while, it's actually at my point of constraint, but that would just be dumb luck if it was the thing that was really bugging me. We think about it the other way. Let's find, and the advisors work with the members, we find with you the thing that is the point of constraint. This is the issue. If you solve this, it's worth millions of dollars to you. Let's bring that to the group. Let's process it and try to get you a great answer. I think the other interesting thing is because the members are from different industries. So I put you with a bunch of guys in the chemical industry, which is your other thing you do. You go like, well, you do it like this because we've done it like that for 75 years, Adam. You don't understand, right?
Right.
But if I put you with a guy who was a fintech guy and a professional services person and a woman who did a marketing company and a different kind of manufacturer and an import-export firm, and they go, Adam, why do you think about the problem like this? Why don't you just do this other thing? Because that completely solves the problem. You go, I don't know, never thought of it. And our idea is that breakthrough thinking comes from outside your industry, not inside your industry. And that's part of the power of having a group like that that's diverse in background and everything. So that case study, everybody does. And as I said, you get awesome feedback on your issue, sometimes breakthrough thinking. But also, now I've got 7 other really good CEOs that I go, I like how Jim did that. I don't know about what Steven's doing over there. Mary, I really like what she's doing on culture. I'm going to take some of those ideas. Or somebody surfaces a problem. You go, that's the problem I've got. And I didn't even realize I had it. So it's just a huge amount of learning when we do it together like this. And then obviously the advisors work one-on-one. So you effectively have an executive coach or a personal advisor in between the meetings. So that's the model. And as I said, it's good for some people. It's not good for others. And we try to find the ones that it works for.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like such an amazing model, especially the idea of working outside of your industry and getting that kind of perspective, because there's a bubble when you're living in an industry that is just so, you just miss out on a lot of opportunities there. And I mean, just the idea of joining a mastermind, a community of like-minded people who can help you and just make you feel like you're not alone at the top of an organization or in a situation. There's so much power in that. And I applaud what you're doing with that, because it's going to help out a lot of people, and it already has, and it will. I mean, you'll touch 1 million lives. Where can people learn more about that if they're interested in joining? How can they get in touch with the CEO Project?
By the way, just real quick, one of the stories I heard at our summit recently is I love my group because sometimes when I need a spine transplant, they give it to me. Meaning I know I have to do something and I don't want to do it.
Right.
They give me a spine to go do what I have to do. So if they want to hear more, the best places to go is theceoproject.com. Theceoproject.com would be the best place to find out about us. And if you want to chat with us, just fill something out and we'll give you a holler and spend some time with you. So. Or you can reach me. I think it's Jim@theceoproject.com would work.
Jim@theceoproject.com. Okay, we'll include that, all of that in the show notes. And I'm really grateful for you being here. And you can also pick up Jim's book, Great CEOs Are Lazy. Check out the Lazy CEO podcast. Jim's everywhere. He's speaking everywhere, and he's doing a lot of speaking and stuff too. So which is incredible. So check that out. Reach out to Jim. Check out the CEO Project. Jim, thank you so much for being here. It's been an honor to speak with you, sir.
Thank you, Adam. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today on Flow Over Fear. If you are liking this show, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be first to know when I drop a new episode, including interviews or trainings or dad jokes. That's right, dad jokes. Add a little levity to your life. And if you liked this episode in particular and you think somebody can get something from it, please share it with a friend. And that way we'll spread the message together. Thanks again for joining me today. See you next time.